My name's Taylor. I'm the owner and operator of Skateco, now run an indoor skate park here in Wodonga, and I'm also the president of Drop In and Take Off, which is a not-for-profit entity built around promoting the physical and mental health benefits of skateboarding.
My name is Shannon and I'm a full-time skate coach here at our Skateco in Wodonga and an all-round bad bitch. We are here to talk about today topics that are uncomfortable, we should talk about more. Sexual abuse, mental health, suicide, everything that people skip around and don't really divulge into. I think there's a huge stigma around mental health, and people in workplaces push out this idea that it's okay to come forward and it's okay to put your hand up and say you need help, but in 95% of workplaces that's not actually the case a lot of the time, and people are scared to come forward and say, hey, I need help, I'm not having a good day. I find myself very fortunate here with Owl. Like, we have an open channel of communication where we can just say we're not having a good mental health day and we don't have the energy to put into the kids or put in 100% to what we want to do.
I have an interesting relationship with the stigma of mental health in that I feel I'm very open about my mental health struggles. Whether it's through work or talking to friends, I've never really felt embarrassed about it. I'm happy to own the fact that I have depression and anxiety, and that's something I'm going to manage every day for the rest of my life. I think one of the biggest things that brought my mental health and me needing to deal with my mental health to a head was the need for me to understand how to parent a child with special needs. So I have 3 children, one of which is on the autism spectrum. And very early on, before we got the diagnoses and the support around us, we went through some really traumatic times. It wasn't until much later on I realised the toll that was taking on me. One of the most traumatic things we went through was at the hospital saying, he can't come home because it's not safe. I've got other children, a baby, a wife that's just given birth. However, from that, everything changed. We got support. We got paediatricians willing to listen to us. We stood up and said, no, this is not okay. We need help. I don't care what you call it, what label you need to give it. I don't care. We just want help. Help for him and help for our family. And we got that, and when we got the help, it's an ongoing journey. But my God, are we and my son is in just a tremendously amazing position than what he was when we're first starting to go through all of this. And I've said to him, and he's quite reserved about people talking about him. He'll be probably a bit uncomfortable when he watches this, but to close the loop, I guess, on that part of my mental health journey, I am able to do what I do now. I work with a number of children on the spectrum in particular. I work with a number of children around skateboarding that have special needs, that have sensory issues similar to what my son has, have regulation, self-regulation issues that they're dealing with, and we're able to create an environment here that caters to those young people, and they get to skate, and they get to find the joy of skating and that outlet and the community of skateboarding and the community that skateboarding offers. I owe that whole part of what we do and my drive to help young people with physical or mental barriers get into skateboarding, and that's because of my son and going through that. So, it's got a, call it a silver lining, I guess. But I owe that to him. That's a really big part of my mental health journey, and through, dealing with that at the time, we, had other small children in the house. I was working a full-time job. I had a career that I was pursuing, and I really just got to a point of something's going to give, and I don't want it to be me. But it took a long time to get there. Unfortunately, it took me having a near suicide episode to realise that I really wasn't okay. I was walking across Hume Street, main old highway in Albury, and I got to the middle median strip, and there was a small white hatchback, and I just about stepped in front of it. Like, I literally stopped myself from stepping in front of this car. And then I went to work. I was a manager, had a team of 10 people, and like, it is absolutely laughable, it was Are You OK Day. So I got to work, turned work owl on, didn't tell anyone what happened, and spent my lunch hour doing a manager's session on Are You OK, talking about how we can support our staff if they're okay, and I got through that, but I wasn't okay, and I happened to call the HR, the wellbeing team person that I knew at work, and just said, I need a chat. And she walked into the room and she said, "You're not okay, are you?" And I went, "No. But I almost stepped in front of the car this morning, and I was thankful at the time. I was working for the ATO, and they have an amazing wellbeing program where staff can get access to different wellbeing supports and psychologists and all that kind of stuff. And as it was, I was already seeing someone through that program. So, she said, "All right, you're not leaving until we either get you to your psychologist or we'll get you home." And that was really the start of me dealing with my mental health. The suicide one's been an interesting one for me because any time I wasn't coping, I would have people, "You're not going to do anything silly," or, those comments where I think it's a softly way of, you don't want to ask someone, "Are you feeling suicidal?" But you say, "Hey, I don't want you doing anything silly." I think it's our socially acceptable way to kind of bridge that topic or have that conversation of like, "Mate, I don't want you doing anything silly," without talking about suicide. Because for some ridiculous, stupid reason, our media won't even use the word suicide in a media article, and they'll say it was non-suspicious circumstances and then list all the fucking Lifeline numbers at the bottom of the article. Like, we're stupid and we don't know that means that person committed suicide. How are we going to help people who are feeling suicidal or having those thoughts to deal with that if we're not even willing to talk about it openly? And then we want to say, "Oh, we want to break the stigma of mental health." Well, okay, let's talk about it. Yes, I've had suicidal thoughts. I've thought about stepping in front of a car. Ahead of it. Yeah, get at least halfway. My heart breaks for my wife. Rach is an amazing woman. She is strong. She has the patience of a saint with me, and especially with our children. I'm amazingly blessed that she's in my life because she's never given up on me. She's never judged me. She has just supported me. One thing when you have been through episodes of feeling suicidal or self-harm thoughts, other people go, "You're so wanted, you're loved, you've got a family that wants you, you've got, you're doing all these awesome things, people want you around." And me sitting here now, I know that. So I say my sane brain knows all of those things. But when my brain is in an overwhelmed with anxiety and depression, it's not working properly. So I'm not thinking that way. I'm not thinking properly. If I was thinking properly, I wouldn't be probably feeling the way I was feeling. So I think that's a big thing for people to, especially when you talk about suicide, it's selfish, it's, how could they do that? It's a coward's way out, all of those things. I can completely understand that view. I don't agree with it, but I can certainly understand that view for the people left behind. But I can tell you, well, from my personal experience, when I've been in that position, my brain at that particular point in time thinks I'm doing those people a favour. I really just want to share my story. If one person watches this and sees something of their life or something of someone they know, and they make one change that positively impacts them, then me sharing my story is worthwhile.
The reason I'm so passionate about this and about these kids and what we get to do for a job is I myself am a survivor of childhood sexual abuse. So looking back at my childhood from the outside, it was tip-top. We had 3 brothers, mum and a dad, that were married for 42 years. They were both pastors in the church at different points of our lives, and we grew up in the church. What wasn't seen from the outside is my own dad molested me from 3 to 13. And it's something that I carried so much shame for. It was something that I always would have preferred to die than have to tell my own mum and to tell my family. So there's a big age gap between myself and my brothers, so we were always quite close. So Ben, who's the oldest, we're still the closest to this day. He was 12, I think, when I was born, so we never had that close age gap where we fought, and we were always so close. The downside of that is they'd all moved out and finished school and moved out of home and moved to Sydney, and I was the last one left there. And I think being ashamed of it and being scared to tell my mum, not for, I don't really know for what other reason, but I was shit scared. For one, she wouldn't believe me, and she'd tell my dad, then I'd be stuck in that where he had the power, knowing that she didn't believe me. I struggled through my teens with risky behaviour, dumb shit, just being an all-round clown because it was funny for my mates, and it got to a point when I got to about 18 that I just couldn't do it anymore. My middle brother Jacob, we lived together at the time, and he had a young girl, had a baby, and my pushing factor with telling my mum was that I was shit scared that the same thing would happen to her, and then I'd have to live with it. So it got to a point where I was sort of off the rails a bit and struggling. I was in therapy, and I'd never told anyone at this point. And my first long-term partner, Mel, had come to a family event at my grandparents' house, and my dad had walked around behind me and put his hands on my shoulders, and Mel had said, like, I'd just gone white and sweaty, and at that point she was like, we're leaving, we need to go. Got in the car, and she just flat out asked me outright, and it all came out from there. 7-8 months later, I had told my godparents by this stage, and we had called mum round there to tell mum. They had then called my father round to come and sit down and talk about it. And Like, I vividly remember Mum just wailing when I told her, and she had said to my father, like, when he sat down, like, we know. And I didn't get the emotional response from him, or that any of us really thought we'd get. He just said a brief sorry for whatever may or may not have happened, got up and left, went home, packed a couple of shirts, and he left the property then. All of the emotions I felt and everything, like, I was hyper-focused on if I just got an apology from him, like, it would make things better. And it took me up until only a few years ago to realise that that's not what you need, and I don't need forgiveness from him. You need to be comfortable with it yourself and proud of where you've come from and proud of what you have survived.
A number of years ago, our family became aware that my father had been inappropriate towards my sisters growing up. And it was something that I was unaware of. It caused a very immediate kind of bringing things to a head that involved everyone getting together, raising what had happened, and making the decision that we would have nothing to do with him moving forward. For me, and I guess my story, and this weighs heavily on my current mental health, at that time, and to this day, I stand in solidarity with my sisters. However, at that point in my life, I had the best relationship that I'd ever had with my dad, ever, and probably had a relationship that I'd longed for forever. And I felt like I wanted to talk to him and understand what the fuck was going on. And I guess, like, he had a story, he had a way of explaining it, and that it was dealt with back then, and from that discussion, I maintained a relationship with him. And as a result of that, my immediate family was put at risk. And that is something that I will carry with me forever. I have an understanding now through some of the therapies I've done about why maybe I made that choice at that particular time to maintain that relationship. But, it just goes back to, I don't know if I'll ever forgive myself for that. I'm really grateful and perhaps feel somewhat unworthy of it, but I still do have a relationship with my sisters and my mum. I can't help but think for them at that time, it would have felt like I didn't have their back, or I didn't believe them, or I wasn't, properly acknowledging what they'd gone through and what had happened to them. Obviously at that particular point in time, I didn't think there was a risk, and there fucking was, and I didn't see that then. And yeah, that's just something that I will carry, and it's a big part of my mental health battle.
Moving forward a bit, we denied over going to the police on it. Eventually built up the courage to do it. 2 middle-aged male police just sort of said to me, like, it's historic, it's pretty hard to prove. What do you want us to do about it? And I left super disheartened on it. I built up the courage to try again, and it was the same shit, different day, like same response from them. And then someone had convinced me just to call another police station and try once more. And that, for me, was the turning point. The cop that I got, her name was Renee. She wasn't much older than me. She would have been in her 30s and I was 20. It was her first case in child protection, and she was like a dog with a bone, and she was on it. And the support that I'd received from her made the other 2 times void. Like, she was it 100% and so supportive of it. We built a friendship throughout. Up until this day, still, Renee, the cop, when I was giving my statement, is the only person I've ever talked through details with. And I think that comes from the shame of it as well. Like, I had always been convinced, like, if I had said to a partner what actually happened, or had told my brothers what actually happened, once it's said, and like, you're dead scared no one will look at you the same. So the investigation with Renee was long and tedious, but it's something I'm super proud of, and proud that I was strong enough to go through it, because there's so many girls that don't, and so many girls that never have the courage to stand up, and that's not their fault. Like, that's everyone else's fault for letting them feel the shame and not letting them feel supported enough to go through it. So the day of the arrest, we did a wire, and they got me to go and speak to him and have a conversation with him and try and prompt him to talk. And that day will live with me forever. Like, I remember thinking he's gonna say sorry, and like, it was an emotional day, and I remember just asking him why, and he looked me dead in the eye and just said, well, I wanted it and you were there, so I took it. And then I realised that he doesn't have that remorse, or he's not capable of that remorse. 10 hours later, Renee rocked back up with a 6-pack, and we just sat out the back in silence and just spent time together. And like, I knew it wasn't just a job for her, and she 100% cared and was there. Day of sentencing, once everything was said and done, like, the other thing, like, some of these cops, you get the bad ones, but you also get ones that genuinely do care. And once sentencing was handed down, I turned around and the cops that were there for the wire that day were in court, just plain clothes. It gave me half a smile, and that's something I'll keep forever. I think being the only girl as well, with 3 older brothers, that was a hard thing to sort of have that connection with them over it. I really didn't know how to speak to them. They didn't really know how to speak to me. And our go-to for trauma was humour, so we'd try and laugh our way through it. My middle brother, Jacob, we were super close together at the time, and we sort of had this unspoken bond where we had the same, I'll say hatred, because that's what it was at the time. I'm not there now, but at the time I did have a strong hatred for him, and Jacob shared the same. Ken wasn't great to Jacob growing up. Jake had recently rebuilt his relationship with Ken, not long to this coming out. So he struggled with it a lot, and for what should have been an easy choice for him, or it shouldn't have even been a choice, he ended up choosing to keep trying to rebuild that relationship with our dad. And for something that it was his daughter that I came out to say it for him to maintain that relationship and keep his kids around our dad, we didn't move past that as a relationship. So now I have 2 great brothers that I'm still really close with. I don't fault Jacob for his decision. It was like having a relationship with our dad was something he's always wanted, and he just started to get it, so that's what he chose. For the other boys, especially Ben, like that, there was a cut-off and a point of no return there as well. Ben and Isaac, my other brothers, are such supportive, great brothers, and Ben, like, he's a super sensitive soul. At 32 and let's see, 44, we still text each other most days. We still talk every week. We still play PlayStation together. Like, we've kept a really close bond. But again, like, that embarrassment that comes from it, we don't talk about it. Shortly after everything had come out and we were having a chat at home, one day Mum had let it slip that I wasn't the first girl that our dad had molested. And this had all come to light when I was 3 and when it had started. So I struggle a lot with that communication not being there. Like, if I had a child and found out that my husband was a pedophile and had molested someone else, there's questions that I would have asked or things I would have done differently. Fuck, I wouldn't have been there. Like, that sort of shit doesn't go away, and it's not a mistake that someone does. It's not an accident. I wish that my mum had had that communication with me, and that's like part of it why I'm so passionate about it at work. Like, I want these boys and girls coming in to know that if they don't have that open channel of communication with their parents and their parents don't ask them the right questions or want to have those conversations, like, they can come in here and they can get help here. Like, they can talk to us, they can speak up, and we're here to help. For me, like, your parents are the 2 people who are supposed to love you automatically and unconditionally. So for me, I've struggled a lot with relationships growing up, whether they're partners or friends or things. Like, I've always had this thing that if the people that were supposed to love you unconditionally and it just come natural, if they don't love you like that, why the fuck else would anyone actually choose to love you? And forever thought like there was something wrong with me, or something, like I did something to make my dad do it. But it takes so long to get to that point where you realise it wasn't you and there's nothing that you could have done differently. You're a child and you don't get to make those choices. The day that my dad was arrested, for me it wasn't just him being arrested. His mother was there, which was my grandma, and I lost her as well. And like part of that shame from it, she's mid-80 years old and screaming while he's getting arrested that I'm a slut and I've asked for it. And that's coming from a mid-80-year-old lady. Like, it doesn't give you the confidence to talk to anyone else about it, and it fills you with shame over it. one of the things, I guess, in society that absolutely gives me the shits, and it maybe not from the younger generation, it might be a generational thing, but it's disgusting when the question is asked, like, what was she wearing? That should never be a question that is even asked by anyone. When anyone is assaulted, anything happens, with people are raped, whatever it happens, what they were wearing doesn't come into it. What you choose to wear, whether you are fully covered, or you're wearing whatever you want to wear, your body is your body. And just because of an outfit choice doesn't give someone else the right or the opportunity to take that from you. Your consent's your consent, no matter what you're wearing. And it shouldn't be, what are we wearing, that's asked as a question. The question is why people think they have the right to touch someone else without consent. What gives them the right to think that that's theirs to take and it's not? And people asking, well, what was she wearing? Like, I'd ask anyone to look at the photos of me when my father started to molest me and fucking tell me that it had something to do with what I was wearing. Whatever any girl was wearing in any situation doesn't come into it. If they had alcohol in their system, if they were out partying, having a good time, whatever, none of that is relevant. The only thing that is relevant is whoever's done it. Whoever's crossed the line and touched them didn't have consent, and that's where the issue is. And it's not boys will be boys. That's not a thing. Every kid should be taught consent from the start, and that's where the line is. Yes or no, it's a simple thing. It's really not that fucking hard. It was only last October that I was the fun one at the footy club and with my mates and going out having a good time, doing risky shit and just always having a laugh and putting on this front for everyone. It was the same side, same time that I knew I didn't want to struggle with this anymore. I think a lot of the time people think suicide is a quick decision, a decision that people regret. But I'll tell you right now, like, the days leading up to my first attempt, I'd never had a calm like that before in my life, because I knew what was coming and it was going to be over. And no one saw it coming, but I knew myself. It was like I was just going through the motions. And my psychologist at the time had rung my doctor and said I was at risk and I wasn't to be given any sort of medication that I could use. And I wasn't quite ready at the time, but I calmly took myself to the doctor and I manipulated the doctor to say I was okay and to give me the medication I wanted. I stockpiled it. I went back and did the same thing. And I remember even in like the last couple of days leading up, I was trying to write. Like, I wrote a letter to my brother, I wrote a letter to my partner. And I remember thinking, like, I should be upset, and I put on sad music and tried to be upset, but I had no emotion to it. Like, I knew I didn't want to live like this forever, and I couldn't keep going how I was. I'd been diagnosed, and it wasn't a new diagnosis, but I'd been re-diagnosed with PTSD and borderline personality disorder. And I remember Googling it and just reading some more in it. And I flat out thought, fuck this, like, I don't want this to be forever for me. So very calmly, I wrote my goodbye letters and had no emotion tied to it. And I think people sometimes get upset and they think, like, when they've lost a loved one to a suicide, like, how could they do this to me, or along the lines of that. Nothing else comes into it at that time. Like, you do not give a fuck about anyone else. Like, you can love them, but at that point in time in your life, they don't come into it. It is you wanting some peace and wanting quiet. And I was struggling at the time with a lot of intrusive thoughts with BPD, and the only way I can describe it, like, your head was just loud. Like, it's a constant argument in your head, and you just want some fucking peace and you just want it to stop. And I'd never been so calm at that point when I knew that it was going to be over. I had, thinking it was going to work quicker than it did, I did message my brother and say goodbye, and I did message a couple of close friends who would, thankfully, I wasn't thankful for him at the time, but thankfully had gotten in touch with my partner and gotten an ambo and gotten me some help. And between that, trying to get out and come back to some sort of normal life, I was back in that same spot 6 weeks later. And Al had sent me a message and said, come down the skate park, and just the warmth from him. And, like, I always say, people know when someone's in the same position, and it's like a sixth sense, like, you know. And Al offered me a job and said, look, I don't have much for you, but why don't you come in a couple of days a week? And then that just grew and grew to where we are now. But at the time, coming in and teaching those kids and seeing what this was about, like, the fulfillment I got from that, and that filling back up my cup got me through each day. And now getting to work with these kids and these kids in high school, like, I want them to know, like, as shit as it is at the time, like, it does get better, and everyone has a purpose. Everyone deserves to be here and deserves to be listened to, and the help, and to feel supported, and to have somewhere safe. And that's what I want through this. Like, if I was 14, all I wanted was someone to be able to talk to about it. If one kid can see this and know that they've got somewhere and things do get better, that's all I can hope for.
I feel blessed that we've created a space and a community where we do have a voice around mental health, and we can support other people that are going through stuff. I am passionate about talking about mental health. I'm passionate about sharing my story. If someone thinks less of me because of this project, or because I'm open about my mental health, and that makes me weak or a sook, or whatever terminology people might want to use, man up, whatever, they're not a loss to me. They're really not. This is me, this is my story, this shit matters, and if me being vulnerable and open helps one other person have a conversation with someone that changes their mental health journey for the better, removes them from a dangerous situation or an unhealthy situation, then it's worth it. I'm not perfect. No one's perfect. I don't have all the answers, but I can share my story. I can share what helped me. I can share what doesn't help me. If I don't say anything to anyone, nothing's likely to change. But if I can put my hand up and go, no, I'm not doing okay, all right, well, what does that look like? Do you need to take a day off work? Do I need to not go home straight after work and go to the Albury Bowl and cut laps around the Albury Bowl and just be me for an hour and, you know, whatever it looks like. And it looks different for everyone. And when you start doing that for yourself, you're better at doing that for other people. And I think that the more people are willing to realise or are open to realise that it's just a journey we're on, a mental health journey, and my mental health journey is no better or worse than anyone else's. It's no more important or less important than anyone else's, because every one of our journeys important because we're living it. You know, but also, if you don't look after yourself, you can't look after everyone else around you, because again, something will give, and it's likely to be you.
For me, like, if you can survive sexual abuse, rape, trauma like that, and come out the other side and keep living, you've done it, and you should be shit proud of it. My dad doesn't deserve a daughter like me. Like, I've turned out all right, and getting to help these kids, I'm proud of me. My brothers are proud of me. He doesn't deserve to know what I'm doing with my life, and he doesn't deserve the opportunity to be proud of me. You've done good, and you've come out the other side. You've survived, and you've come out stronger for it. And if any of these kids in the community, any of the kids, they don't even have to be in this community, like, they can reach out and know that we can listen and understand about it, and there is no shame. You do get to a point in life where that shame goes, and you become proud of yourself and proud of what you've made it through and where you've ended up.
I'm not sure where our Taylor is. He reckoned he was going to be here first. And, no sign. There he is. And after all the shit he gave me about making sure I wake up, I don't know where the fuck he is. This bloke rolls in 7:03. Joke. Good morning.
I'm literally in bed. Well, because my phone rang on my wrist.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, that's my alarm.
When
Shannon.
When you didn't reply about the coffee, I was like, maybe he's doing backside airs. Maybe he's busy.
I think, you know, I talked a bit about stigma and the stigma of mental health. I had a stigma around being on antidepressants, and it was kind of like, okay, I need them, but I want to get off them.
Yeah.
And then I thought, oh, I've changed my life around. I'm skating for a living. I'm getting to do lessons, and it has been amazing. But it's not a magic thing that, like, you know, I have depression and anxiety, and it's something that I'll have forever, most likely, and it's just something I manage. And I think if a doctor said I had a hole in my heart and I needed to take this tablet every day,
You wouldn't be embarrassed about it.
no, I'd just take it.
Yeah.
But the fact that it says antidepressant on the box, you think, I only want to be taking this for a little while. Or
Yeah. And that's like, same thing, like I'm dreadfully embarrassed with the same stigma to take an antipsychotic, and I don't think they should be called that, because you are embarrassed to say that you're on medication for this or for that. But I think getting to that good spot where you think you don't need your medication is the most dangerous point. This place, the park, you and Rach, the kids, all of it, like this place 100% saved me. And not on one occasion, but on multiple occasions before I started coming in to skate. Like I was off work at home and recovering from my first suicide attempt. And I think finding this place and developing this bond, and then getting back into skating, meeting the kids, all of that stuff, it gave me a purpose that I didn't have before. Like I was going through the motions. And I think with my mental health, it's like I get low, but I think with BPD, I get low so quickly. It can be over something stupid like anything. And then for me, like, that's not regulating your emotions. That's it for you. And getting to know you and Rach and what we do here, and getting to form these bonds with the kids, like obviously not having kids of my own, that forming these bonds and building the relationships with them. There was the time I left here and literally turned off my location and sat up on a ledge, and it was Booth texting me telling me Tilly was good for the morning. That was the point to bring me back down, because I was like, fuck, like, how are they going to explain to Tilly that you can't come anymore? And I think moving away from that sort of high-paying career and finding it, not a job, but finding something that you get so much fulfillment out of it, and it fills your cup, and the happiness you get from it is worth more than anything. And I wouldn't trade this and what we do for anything.
You know, there's still days, once a week at least once a week, I'll walk out into the park at 3:30 in the afternoon, and I could have been in the office all day looking at bills and insurances and all of that kind of stuff, and I get to walk out and I'll turn around and look around at the skate park mid-afternoon at 4:30 in the middle of lessons and go, look at the atmosphere in here.
Yeah.
I had a parent the other day going, gee, it's buzzing in here, just the vibe in here, like the excitement levels, and like it wasn't a busy afternoon, but the energy in the park was so positive. And I think it just can't be underestimated. You know, and that's all kind of sporting clubs and dirt bike ride, whatever it is. I know we focus a lot on skateboarding, but
Could be scooter riding.
it could be scooter riding. You know, whatever it is to fill your bucket. And, you know, and I also think pouring so much back in to the not-for-profit side of things, doing programs with people who are less fortunate and people who just wouldn't find their way naturally to a skate park, is really, really rewarding, because those reactions you get from those young people or those adults or that are finding it for the first time it is priceless.
Yeah.
The fact that we can lock up the shop here in the afternoon and we've had a busy day, or we've done a heap of lessons and all that kind of stuff, and I'm already thinking about, oh, could I fit a skate in on the way home, or I'm going to get up tomorrow morning and go for a skate. I think, it's that age-old thing. If you've got if you're a chippy, the last thing they want to do is go home and fix something that's broken at their house.
Yes.
Whereas I leave here and the first thing I'm thinking about is, well, could I get in a cheeky skate on the way home? I think that it just says mountains about what we do and why we do it.
My favourite part of our day-to-day here is literally just at the end of the day when the park's empty, it's quiet, turning off those lights and skating out. You're like, how the fuck is this real?
Yeah.
That we get to come here every day and do this. You pay us to.
Yeah.
You enable it.
Yeah, I'm an enabler.
Not that you enable it, but it's because of the sacrifices you made leaving your career and all the risks you took to have this place. I think sometimes you need to be reminded of what you've done for other people and the differences you've made in their lives. Not like you made a difference in your own life by doing it, but sometimes I think you forget the butterfly effect you've had from it.
Look, and, it's, I think, human nature. It's always hard to take compliments and hear people talking.
And I don't give you many.
No, you don't give me many, so I'll take this one while I've got it. But I think, I hear you say that, and I absolutely appreciate that, and I'm humbled by that. But also, my mind goes to Rach.
She's the real hero here.
She is the real hero.
She is.
And, she is, because she's pulled me out of so many holes that I've been in. And anyone who has mental health issues has many heroes for different reasons at different times that have pulled them out of a hole. And often those people don't realise the impact that they've had on a person by something they've said, something they've done, a comment they've made, something positive, something kind. You'll never know the full impact of what you've had, but it's not lost on me, and it's funny without trying to sound arrogant, but during COVID and after COVID, and it's been a real struggle financially, and there has been times where we're like, what are we doing? Is this worth it? We're just battling. We've really been battling post-COVID, but I kind of keep coming back to me and Rach, just go, we can't stop doing this. It's too much. Not just my mental health, our family's environment. There's so much riding on this working, not from a financial point of view, but for everyone else. So it's kind of that, no, we've got to keep, what's the alternative? Stopping? There's too much good comes of this to stop. We've just got to make it work.
I think it's massive for Rach as well, like, as a wife and a mother, to be like, yes, quit your secure job and start a skate park. Like, the balls that woman has to encourage that and support you through it, and everything she does for here, like, she's it.
We all sacrifice for this place, whether it's sacrifice a salary you could be otherwise earning, or I sacrifice time because this takes so much time, to run a small business, and I sacrifice time with my family. And, you're sacrificing the fact that Jen's moving away from work and you're not going with her at the moment. And it's that balance of, you don't want to sacrifice so much that it does become a negative part of your life. But it's acknowledging that, okay, times are stressful, whether it's whatever the stresses are, family, financial, running a business, all of that kind of stuff, you kind of put it all in balance and go, okay, well, if this gets too hard, we can stop. But then the downside of stopping this still outweighs the negatives of pushing through.
And I think there's even like when we first had the refugee kids in, or even the other week, when it's just that overwhelmingly, like, just the happiness you get from it, and when I look across the park and look at it and think, fuck, like, it's just a normal day, and you sort of take a step back. This is absolutely worth all the sacrifices.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I think part of it is we just get to light the skate fire in someone else for the first time, or in your case, reignite the fire that was always, it goes back to embers every now and again. We move away from it, but, just to light that fire for other people to take part in skateboarding for the first time, and join that community and the culture and everything that has, it's provided for us to pass that on. It's priceless.
Yeah, I think 100%. I am here and alive because of this place. You, Rach, the kids, the community, what we get to do, everyone that works here is and has been so many times my reason to try again another day, to get up another day.
And that's it's priceless, mate. It's priceless to hear you say that. It means the world to me to hear you say that. And it's why I'm still here. My family, Rach pushing me to do this, has found a way for me to turn my passion into a job and keep the bucket full.
Do you remember your first skateboard?
Yeah, I remember we left Perth and we moved over to Point Lonsdale, and we had this house before, the rented house or whatever, and it was like a demountable, so it had like a shitty deck all the way around it. And there I got home and there was this skateboard, Kmart Target Complete, the ones where it's a Kmart Complete where the plastic. The bolts are screwed through they're wrapped it in plastic before I put the trucks on.
And there's still plastic no matter how hard you try.
No matter what you do, there's always still plastic. And I don't even know if I let my parents give it to me. I think I just saw the skateboard there and I'm like, oh, well, it won't be for anyone else. And I used to just skateboard on the shitty decking up the top. Of yours.
Mine. So the first skateboard I ever got, so our neighbour across the road, Chris Sterling, he used to skate and I used to think he was cool as shit, and like he was my brother's best friend, and he used to go through skateboards like we do now, and he would give me his old stuff exactly the same as we do now with the young kids, but we weren't particularly well off, so Chris used to give me his skateboard or give me old trucks and wheels and stuff, and I used to take them completely apart, like pop the bearings out, take the hardware, and then I used to clean it and wrap everything individually so I'd have heaps of presents to open.
That's amazing.
Then I'd put it back together and we had this shitty concrete veranda out the front, and that's it. So I used to, it had like the cracks in it, and I used to put the hose in the crack and try and ollie over. And this thing only would have been like 8 meters long or something, but that was it. And I used to froth when he'd give me any of his old gear and just thought I was fucking red hot having it.